Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sports Lock Podcast. I want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving and hopefully you enjoy your week. Last week, we took a little bit of a bye week ourselves, didn't do a podcast or go on to Zoom, a busy week, but we are back for this special Thanksgiving week and this special Thanksgiving podcast. It won't take up too much of your time today. Just due to not really having anything from week 11 selected due to the bye week. So we're going to jump right into our predictions, a daily fantasy, and start sit. Of course, at the end, we'll talk a little bit more about TikTok going live on there each and every Wednesday night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. Make sure to check it out. It's a good way for us to interact, you to ask me start sit questions, trades, daily fantasy, anything fantasy football or sports betting related. You come on live to my TikTok, the Beast Benny Cakes, and I will answer those questions for you. So let's not waste any more time. We got a busy week. I'm sure you do as well with family and friends celebrating Thanksgiving. And we have 3 Thursday Thanksgiving games this year, starting with Buffalo at Detroit. Now, Buffalo's technically playing their second game in a row in Detroit due to the snowstorm last week, but they are 9.5 point favorites on the road in Detroit. I will take Detroit to cover. Detroit's offense is really good, and the Buffalo Bills defense has been giving up a lot of points as of recent. Detroit has a really high power offense. Again, they're back home. Detroit on Thanksgiving. You don't really want to bet against them. I do think Buffalo wins, but I do have Detroit covering the 9.5. Over under 54.5. I think there will be a lot of points put up on the board. Again, Detroit's defense is one of the worst in the league. Buffalo's defense not doing as well, which means I think that there will be some good amount of points put on the board. So I would play slightly the over, but I do think Buffalo comes away with the win. Next, we have the New York Giants at the Dallas Cowboys, and the Dallas Cowboys are 9.5 point favorites at home on a little bit of a winning streak here, looking really, really good with Dak Prescott back, beating and I should say obliterating the Vikings last week. And they just look phenomenal. They're definitely a contender to possibly go to the Super Bowl, and they have the Giants in town who, they're the Giants, right? They started off so hot, but at the end of the day, they're still the Giants as we know them. So I do like Dallas minus 9.5. If they were able to take down the Vikings by almost 40, I don't see why at home on Thanksgiving Day that they would, lose by less than that to a much worse team. So give me Dallas minus 9.5. The over under of 45.5. I'm going to slightly play the over, and we're going to ride with that on Thanksgiving Day. And lastly, on Thanksgiving night, we have the New England Patriots traveling to the Minnesota Vikings. And this is going to be my first lock of the week. I love Minnesota minus 2.5. They are coming off, again, that huge upsetting loss to Dallas. I don't think that's going to happen with New England. I think it's going to be a close game, but Minnesota is going to find a way to get the victory like they've done all season. New England, not a bad team, but they're not the Vikings. So give me the Vikings as a lock, minus 2.5 at home. And I'm going to slightly play under 42.5. We saw the game last week between the Patriots and the Jets, only able to put up 10 points, and that touchdown coming from the defense at the end on that punt return. So the offense, I think, are going to have some troubles. Minnesota's offense is a little bit better, but still under 42.5. So the Thanksgiving play is Detroit plus 9.5, Dallas minus 9.5, and Minnesota minus 2.5. We're going over in both the earlier games and under in the nightcap. So let's move on to Sunday now. We're starting off with Tampa Bay at Cleveland, over under 42.5. I actually like Cleveland to cover this plus 3.5 and to outright win. Cleveland has been, not the best team, but they do compete, and the Buccaneers have been hit and miss. So going into Cleveland, we don't know what the weather will be like there. I think Cleveland pulls off the upset. I definitely would take them plus 3.5. Over under 42.5. I'm going to slightly play under that. So go with the under there. Cincinnati minus 1.5 at Tennessee. Again, I'm going to take the underdogs technically in this one, Tennessee plus 1.5 and to outright win. Cincinnati looks good, but they barely beat the poor Steelers team. Maybe have Jamar Chase back right now. It's iffy, but there's potential that he does play. But Tennessee's an overall solid team with a good defense. So traveling to Tennessee, I'm going to take the home team plus 1.5, over under of 42.5. I'm going to play the under just slightly with that one as well. Houston plus 13 at Miami. We're going to go with the home team to win, the Miami Dolphins, but I do think Houston covers that 13. 13 is a lot of points. They are making a quarterback change this week, so they're going to try to, um, you know, perform better than they did last week against the Commanders. So give me Miami to win, Houston to cover, and over under 46.5. I'm going to play slightly the under because I do think both of these teams will put up some points, but not quite that many, especially with Houston's offense. Chicago plus 4.5 at the New York Jets. We are again going to go with the underdog here to flat out win and to cover the points. Chicago plus 4.5. Right now, the Jets are not going with Zach Wilson. They're saying no to him after their disappointing loss last week. Chicago coming in. Justin Fields is probably not going to be playing. They say it's probably his AC joint in his shoulder. So I highly doubt that he will play. So in that case, it's just going to be a boring, low scoring game. So I do like Chicago to cover the 4.5. I will pick them to win as well, either way. Under 39.5, though. There's not going to be much offense on the board with two new quarterbacks there. My next lock of the week is going to be the Commanders -4 at home against the Atlanta Falcons. The Commanders have been looking really good lately. An impressive big victory against the Texans. I know it was the Texans, but they beat them handily last week. I do think coming home to Washington will help them. Atlanta is Atlanta. They've been struggling a little bit here and there. They only have one road win all season, and they've lost every other road game, of course, and by a pretty significant amount each time. So they struggle on the road. That makes me like Washington even more at home, -4 for the lock. Over under, I'm going to go over 41.5. I think that's just a little bit too low for these teams. Next, we have Denver at Carolina. Denver's 2.5 point favorites, and I would take that. Denver coming off a disappointing loss at home to the Raiders. This is a must-win, bounce-back win for this Broncos team. Russell Wilson has not lived up to who he is in Denver. This week is a chance to get back on the right track. So I like Denver -2.5 at Carolina. Over under is only 36.5 points, which is insanely low. So I'm going to go over that because it is insanely low. I think it's going to be like a 21-17 type game, and it'll hit the over slightly. Baltimore -4 at Jacksonville. That's going to be my next lock of the week, but it's not Baltimore -4 or Jacksonville +4. It's the over of 43.5. Both teams can put up points. Baltimore struggled last week, but Jacksonville coming off the bye, they're going to be refreshed. That good offense led by Christian Kirk and Travis Etienne. Baltimore, they're going to have to compete with that. So I do think that it hits the over of 43.5. I will take Baltimore -4 in to win at Jacksonville, but I do think this is going to be a higher scoring affair to get you to over the 43.5. The Chargers at the Arizona Cardinals starts the 4 o'clock hour games. The Chargers are 4 point favorites on the road against the Arizona Cardinals. The over under is 47.5. This is a division game. I expect it to be close. So I'm going to take Arizona +4. But I'm going to take the Chargers to win. The Cardinals have just looked god awful lately. And with Colt McCoy at quarterback, we don't know if Kyler Murray's going to be back this week. If not, maybe I would lean more Chargers -4, but the Chargers have been competing in games, but not doing as good as they should be. So I like Arizona to cover the 4, Chargers to win, over under 47.5. I would slightly take the over. I think there will be some points put up on the board, especially if Kyler Murray is back. We next jump to the Raiders plus 3.5 at the Seattle Seahawks. This game I was tempted to take Seattle as a lock as well, minus 3.5. The Raiders coming off of an impressive win at Denver, and the Seahawks coming off their bye. I do think the Seahawks continue their hot streak against this poor defense, and over under 47.5. I think it'll slightly hit under. I don't think it's going to be that many points put up. But two pretty good offenses there, and Seattle's defense is much better than Las Vegas's. So that's why I like Seattle at home coming off the bye, minus 3.5. The Rams are plus 14.5 at the Kansas City Chiefs. That's right. The Super Bowl champs plus 14.5. If I told you that early in the season, you'd say it's nuts, but it's true. The Rams struggling, no Cooper Kupp. So they go to Kansas City. I do like the Rams to cover the 14.5, though. I just think that's way too much. I do like the Chiefs to win. The over under 44, I would slightly take the over in that one. We next have the Saints plus 9.5 at the 49ers. Another one I really wanted to lock in was Niners minus 9.5. The Niners have looked phenomenal since Christian McCaffrey has come into town, and they just have a really good complete team. Destroying the Cardinals the other night on Monday Night Football in Mexico City. I think that continues this coming weekend in San Francisco, even with the short week. Give me the Niners minus 9.5 against the Saints, over under 43.5. Give me the under because I do think that the Saints will struggle to put the points on the board. Green Bay plus 7 at Philadelphia for the Sunday Night Football game, over under 45.5. I think that Green Bay can find a way to cover that 7, so I would take them plus 7. But I like Philadelphia outright to win. So give me Philadelphia, but Green Bay plus 7 and over under 45.5. I'm going to play the under in this one as well. And lastly, our last lock of the week is going to be Indianapolis minus 2.5 at home against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has been struggling mightily, and they're on the road against an Indianapolis team that should have beat the Eagles last week. I think that they get that win on Monday night, minus 2.5. So just need a field goal to win by. Over under is 39.5. Give me the under. It's a close, low scoring game, 17-14 Indianapolis. They get the win and help us lock in that bet. So now let's go to our week 12 daily fantasy lineup. I really like this one this week. I think it'll get the job done for us. First, we're going with Jimmy Garoppolo. And let me tell you, Jimmy Garoppolo has looked phenomenal in the last couple of games. 4 touchdowns the other day, which tied with Joe Burrow on the week. So at only 5,600 playing at home, that is a phenomenal steal for Jimmy G. That's where we're going there. For a running back, we're going Ken Walker, and we're going with Travis Etienne Jr. Both teams coming off the bye. Great running backs there. I think they explode this week, especially Ken Walker against that poor Raiders defense. 6,900 for him, and we're paying 6,700 for Travis Etienne Jr. But I really like those two this week. For our flex and our other running back spot, we're going 3 running back, 3 wide receiver this week. We're going to go Latavius Murray for Denver. A pretty nice game last week. No more Melvin Gordon on the team. He's released, which means Latavius Murray is the number 1 guy. So he is going into Carolina. I think he'll get a lot of looks, especially some checkdowns from Russell Wilson. That'll help him, and we're only paying 5,000 for him. So I really like that steal this week. For our wide receivers, DeAndre Hopkins, he continues to get the job done. He's the number 2 fantasy wide receiver since in the past 4 weeks. So pretty much since he's come back. So again, we're riding with him, 7,700. It's well worth it. They got to utilize him. He is their only good receiver right now with the injuries to Marquise Brown. Not sure if he's playing or not day to day. Rondale Moore got hurt. Greg Dortch got hurt. So besides AJ Green, DeAndre Hopkins, the only other guy. And don't forget Zach Ertz, their tight end that they utilize a lot out for the season. So I like Hopkins this week with the volume he'll be getting, probably somewhere around 10 to 12 receptions. We're also going with Christian Kirk coming off the bye. He had a phenomenal game, 30-some fantasy points prior to the bye week. He's their guy. He's a number 8 fantasy wide receiver on the year. Only 6,500 for him. We will take that. Love the deal this week, even with a tough Baltimore defense coming into town. Lastly, for our wide receivers, we go Brandon Ayuk. He has been the touchdown guy for the 49ers, $6,400 for him. I again think he gets the volume this week. Him and Jimmy G have that connection. Only 2 catches last week, but they were both for touchdowns. So as long as that's happening, you're good and it's worth the price. Going with Austin Hooper, who's been a top 4 fantasy tight end in the last 2 weeks, 2 touchdowns the last in the last 2 games. He's looking great. He is being utilized in Tennessee, and with how poorly that offense really is with their wide receivers not really utilizing them, Austin Hooper has been a benefit of that. So for only 3,000, we're going to ride the hot streak of Austin Hooper. And lastly, we're going to go with the worst defense, the Packers, 2,200 this week. I know it's not ideal, and we'll be lucky to get a point or 2 out of them. But if they do so, it opens up that phenomenal beginning lineup that we had. We'll take 1 or 2 from them if we pay down for them, where we can pay up in other areas that'll really help us out with those great wide receivers and running backs we selected. And lastly, our week 12 start sit. I'm starting Geno Smith this week. He has a great matchup against the Raiders at home. Coming off the bye, he's going to be refreshed, rejuvenated, and ready to put up points for you. So I'd start him. I'm sitting Daniel Jones. He's been doing well of recent, not many interceptions he has thrown, but playing against the Dallas Cowboys defense that allowed 2 points, only 2 points to the Minnesota Vikings quarterback Kirk Cousins last week. That's that same defense that Daniel Jones has to go up with. So I would sit him in any way possible this week. Starting Latavius Murray, told you why already. I think he goes off this week and a good flex option. I'm going to sit Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. They weren't able to get the ball going, or the ball, yeah. They weren't able to run the ball, get that going, the running game last week against the Jets. And with Damian Harris back, they're splitting some time again. Give me Ramondre Stevenson to sit this week if you have him. I think that's the safe bet going up against the Minnesota Vikings. I'm going to start Tyler Lockett. If Geno Smith's going to go off, it's going to be Tyler Lockett benefiting from it. I see him getting 1 to 2 touchdowns. I'm leaning more 2 touchdowns this week for him. Against this poor Raiders defense, I think he'll just blow by the secondary. He's a guy that must be started. A guy that I'm sitting is Tyler Boyd, who a few weeks ago he'd be on my start list, but he wasn't utilized against Pittsburgh. And this week in Tennessee, I don't think he'll be utilized, especially if Jamar Chase comes back. So I would sit him even at a flex spot. And lastly, told you to start Austin Hooper. We're picking him up in daily fantasy. We're riding his hot streak. And I'm going to sit Foster Moreau of the Las Vegas Raiders. Just hasn't been involved in the passing game as much as I like. Going into Seattle, I don't think he'll be a benefit in that game. So I'd be sitting Foster Moreau. That's all we got for this week. A very short podcast for you. We didn't have anything really to review. But if you want to come live on TikTok, I go live Wednesdays at 9:30 Eastern time on the Beast Benny Cakes. That's my personal account. We have to do it on there instead of the Sports Lock podcast account until we get 1,000 followers on there. I do have that on my personal account. So we've been doing really good. The last time out, we had 25,000 likes and views on that one. It was 2 Wednesdays ago. I was also had on a special guest, Jaguars Walter Picks, on there. We were talking fantasy football a little bit briefly. So I'm going to try to bring on guests and again, answer all your questions. So if you come on live, drop in the chat any fantasy football or sports betting related question. I will answer it. That's every Wednesday, 9:30 Eastern on the Beast Benny Cakes account. You can also make sure to follow me on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at Sports Lock Podcast. But other than that, I want to thank you for listening in. I hope you do well this week. We are only 3 weeks away from the fantasy playoffs. So now is the time to win and try to get a place in the playoffs. So a huge week coming up this week, and hopefully a good week of sports betting as well. So I wish you and your family a happy Thanksgiving, and I will see you guys then, hopefully on TikTok tonight if you are free. If not, next week for next week's podcast. Have a good one.